My guest today on the podcast is Lucy Freedman. Lucy's been a trainer and therapist in transactional analysis using NLP for a good long while and has taken a good portion of her career to bring NLP and leadership development coaching into corporations. I'm very thrilled to have her here. She's been somebody I've been wanting to get on this podcast for a long time, and things have conspired against us. But here we go, Lucy Freedman. Looking forward to this. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Hello, Lucy. Nice to see you.
Hi, Doug.
Welcome. So I'm in New York State. You're in Santa Cruz-ish, California?
I'm in the Santa Cruz Mountains in Northern California.
That's amazing. And you guys have had quite a bit of weather there of late.
Today, it is not raining. This is a notable day.
Wow. But you've had bomb cyclones. I never heard of bomb cyclones. And now you guys get bomb cyclones. You get atmospheric rivers coming at you. I mean, good Lord Almighty.
I know.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Anyway, that's not why I asked you here. This is the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And I'm amazed that we've never met before. I mean, seriously, in person or otherwise. I just met you for the first time like a day ago, but you've been around NLP longer than I have. Since the beginning, practically. Can you tell us a little bit about your roots in the NLP world?
Well, it was a definitely life-changing experience to be introduced to NLP. I had been already practicing transactional analysis. Mm-hmm. I was a TA therapist, and I also was a high school teacher back in the day. And that's when NLP came along. It was one of my TA trainers who actually introduced me to some of these funny words that were NLP based. So I got curious about that. And I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, so I wasn't here in the heart and hotbed of developing the NLP, but I was fortunate because there were some connections that brought people to DC, including Robert Dilts. Your podcast with him I was just listening to is so delightful to be reintroduced to a lot of those distinctions. But back then, there were a couple of initial trainings in NLP, and some of the first things that Robert did were some workshops on metaprograms. So we were coming from metaprogram, which interestingly, when you're studying transactional analysis, one of the big aspects of that is life scripts. Mm-hmm. Life scripts and interpersonal games, which are patterns that repeat. And metaprograms certainly are the design of our lives and so many things. And they were just exploring that then. And I remember being in several different living rooms where workshops were being held. And then they began developing the practitioner trainings. And that's when I met more of the people, because they would come through and kind of do the dog and pony show weekends.
This was still in Washington, or did you relocate at this point?
That was in Washington.
Okay.
I was in Washington for years. And in fact, my first NLP trainings in California were by coming out here for trainer training. Mm-hmm. And I think it might have been 81, where they had a building over on the west side of Santa Cruz that was the Division of Training and Research of NLP.
Division of Training and Research, DOTAR, right?
DOTAR, yes, they had DOTAR going, and
I have heard of DOTAR. I think it was David Gordon was telling me about DOTAR. What an amazing thing that you were there. Bandler, Grinder, Leslie Cameron Bandler, David Gordon. Yeah. I mean, good
and
God.
David was one of the people who came on the road trips to DC. And so I and a friend of mine and David, we actually hung out, after training sometimes because they were out of town, and so we would just hang out with them. And it was really fun to spend time with David Gordon, as well as Robert and some of the others that came.
Great people. So that's just amazing to me that you've been around for that long. And Joe Tower is actually a place that you could go to and that you were there.
It was a physical place. That's where I met Michael Grinder there, as well as, of course, John, Richard, and all. But Michael Grinder, Michael LeBeau.
Wow.
Actually,
Awesome.
Stephen, Connie Ray, Andreas as well were participants and part of the group there.
Amazing. Cool. And so you became a trainer. Did you do any trainings? Did you do NLP training? Did you teach people?
I did somewhat under the name of NLP, and I was interested at the time, both with what I was doing with TA and with NLP, is translating it to people who weren't going to show up in a therapy office, and where there were larger needs, and my idea of spreading things more broadly, and also what was learnable by people who were out in the population, because we were spending weekend after weekend doing NLP trainings and going 21 days in depth into and when I was interacting with people in organizations and in government agencies, because I was in the DC area, and people in businesses, is that wasn't going to transmit.
Right.
Later, it turned out that some of my clients at HP did get turned on enough to get the budgets to be able to send their people to practitioner training. So there's a whole cadre of people out here in the West Coast who learned NLP because Hewlett Packard did fund their training. But mostly, you're not going to reach as broad an audience. So what I did was I designed what I felt were the core skills and the categories of behavior skills into something that would address technical professionals who could use people skills. And it was a way of using the technology of communication that came out of NLP to meet people where they are and give them a kind of a technology for interacting with these rather dreadful and unpredictable things called humans.
Yeah.
Because if you're a systems programmer at that time in the world, you're dealing with computers, you're dealing with machines, you're dealing with, way before everybody had one in their hand and in their pocket and on their watch.
I know. My watch rang the other day. Is it hello? Talking
so people were dealing with a lot of breakdowns in organizations that happened to center around developing the computer systems. And so I saw that as a business need, and also a thing that would attract people who wouldn't normally go for, it's not like the sales guys who all wanted to learn NLP or TA or things that would help them sell. These were people who were, please protect me from having to deal with too many people.
Yeah.
And so we took on the challenge.
I'm particularly fascinated by that because, these days, or I don't know when these days started, but mostly people who learn NLP, they take a practitioner training, and then they go from a practitioner to the master practitioner training. And then if they want to continue on, they take a trainer's training. And then all they do from there is they say, okay, now I am a trainer, so I'll teach other people on the practitioner training, and then teach them in the master practitioner level. And then maybe they'll get to be trainers too. And then, so there's more and more people just doing NLP trainings. That's kind of it.
Which is great. If they're also practicing with people who aren't in NLP, if they're also practicing with coaching clients and people.
Yeah, because what are the 5 elements that you took that you sort of codified in a way to make it accessible for non-NLP?
Yeah, these will all be things that are recognizable to people with NLP, though the terminology. One of the things I will say that I learned from transactional analysis is that using easily understandable language, if you want to transmit the skills to the people you're working with, versus just using it with them.
Yeah.
The language needs to be not things like, meta model and complex equivalence and linguistic terms that come from NLP. And
Yeah.
so I was working on, it took me a while to just get these things named, but they're very recognizable to people who've learned NLP because most of it is NLP based. So one is the area of outcomes, being able to shift to, actually, I think we were the ones who first named Robert used to teach about the problem frame and the outcome frame, and then it would be called the blame frame. And we were teaching one day and one of our participants said, and the aim frame. The blame frame and the aim frame. And so we developed that. So, and then how do you develop a fully specified outcome? So that section we just call plan. So having outcomes, being able to shift to the positive and not the problem, is one set. That's thing one. Thing two, you mentioned in your conversation with Robert, was interesting about how the first people who learned to do meta modeling or gathering information from John Grinder went out without using rapport. And so the whole second group that we have we call link, which are the rapport skills.
Right, good.
And then we took the meta model itself, mostly distinguishing between what and how questions versus why questions, and took it into the area we call inform, which is how do you gather information, clean information, high quality information. So inform skills are third aspect. And then there are learn, like you do what you set your outcome, you do what you do. It's like Robert's test, operate, test, exit, like what's my outcome? Then what did I do? And then in the center, what I brought in that is not NLP based, but the NLP principle of modeling, modeling excellence applies here. Sure. And it was the modeling the excellence in one of the core practices of everyday life and business, which is making requests and agreements. And we call that area balance, with a number of implications about balancing between people and balancing the task and the relationship and so forth. But it comes down to how do you articulate clear requests? How do you follow up? All the things you have to do to be effective in any organization, interaction, relationship. Right. So those are the five. We call them plan, link, inform, learn, and balance.
And all together, that's your syntax for change.
That's the syntax for change.
Cool.
Yes.
And if people want to find out more about that, they can go to syntaxforchange.com.
If they want to find out. And we have people who are now bringing syntax into combination of their coaching practices and their corporate clients, who are now in the next cohort of people who are getting certified in syntax and bringing it to new audiences. So, people who want to find out about that they could join in if they want to go, now I have NLP, how do I apply it in a corporate or a coaching setting? Right. Syntax is kind of a translation into things that are grokkable, if you will.
Oh, good. Robert Heinlein, I love it. Yeah. So,
and it's fun because what allowed me over the course of all this time is to go into foreign lands like engineering and learn from people and model what was working in systems design and other kinds of business activities that would not normally be what somebody who follows the TA, NLP, therapy, teaching path, you usually don't get to go across into those lands.
Yeah, no, I get it. So the book you wrote is called what? I've forgotten exactly. It's Smart Work. Smart Work, yeah.
Excuse me, Smart Work. It's currently, excuse me, that's why I have the T. The subtitle is Smart Work, the Syntax Guide to Influence. Yes, and it can be ordered on Amazon. It can be ordered from the publisher, which we prefer to do, which is Happy About. So
if they go to your website, Syntax for Change, they can
find it. Yes. Yeah. Yes, they can get it. They can also just get a chapter and read one of the chapters. Because some of my friends who are also have at times been corporate clients and corporate partners in teaching syntax and bringing it out have called it the Bible, or similar to how coaching relationships work.
Yeah.
And she was bringing some of that material, and NLP to her coaches circle in Austin.
Yeah.
But she's somebody who's been a supporter of smart work and spreading it in corporate settings for a long time. Somebody I met in NLP, in being involved in NLP back in Washington, D.C. in the day.
Back in the day.
So the networks work. The networks work, Doug, just like it brought us together.
So the idea of the syntax guide to influence. So the syntax for change, syntax guide to influence.
Smart work, yes.
Yeah, smart work is the subtitle is syntax guide to influence. So it's influence like sales, or what do you mean by influence in this?
Well, we wrote it. We directed it toward people who are technical professionals working in organizations, and really just broke down NLP skills like outcomes. How do you develop? How do you ask questions? How do you influence within the organization? Because often the issue for people who are both innovative and the very skilled, detailed people who program and people who are on the front edge of all that, they have to sell their ideas internally in their organization. They have to get along in teams, just like all of us do. It's not that these skills are particularly needed by them, because it's needed by everybody. As you know, everybody everywhere, we need to learn these skills. That's the book I'm working on now is kind of what people ought to know. Seems only fair that folks have some of the distinctions that we learned through NLP, and some of the other models.
Yeah. But I've always found it somewhat curious that NLP, which is a communication skill, theoretically, and
as you were talking with Robert, also a state management skill, state management communication.
Yeah, it's actually used for a variety of things, but overall it's communication. It's communication with our intrapersonal communication, and yet sometimes it seems like unless somebody's talking with our jargon, our NLP jargon, we can't get the message across. So what you're doing is you're translating it, if you will, to normal language, to think, to connect, to learn, that's what the corporate people are already speaking. They're speaking English, basically. So you're just, putting it into the language that they can understand, which is, I think, the basis of rapport, isn't it? To be able to, pace and then lead.
That's certainly part of it, is to see how we can speak their language. In fact, we even changed the terminology. We talk match and lead, just because it's more common, match behavior. So we do introduce those distinctions. And I would also say that we try to keep the language part light, because it's experiential. Learning syntax.
I missed the word. I missed the word. You keep the language what?
Simple. Keep it light. Keep it light. Keep it
light.
Not the heavy part of the learning, because what we want is this thing of we use the quote of that's from New Guinea tribe, I think, that is knowledge is only a rumor until it's in the muscle. So it's all about, in our workshops, and even when we do them online or in person, it's very translatable. It's about we have people experience the distinctions. So you experience asking questions one way, and I remember the first time I learned this with Robert Dilts in an NLP workshop, is talking about the problem versus talking about the outcome. But we have people, and we're one of the things we're really good at, and that we've been good at helping other trainers learn, is how to present within the training setting, so that people are very clear on what's the distinction you're trying to get here. I don't know if in NLP training, we call them endless triads, where we would try things one way and then we'd try things another way. And we'd always be in triads, where one person's observing and one person's working with the other person. to get a change, and then you have the third person observing. And so that you can notice the differences between taking one approach or taking another approach,
Right.
you know, and get feedback
Well, that's
on what you're
interesting.
doing. So there are a lot of things that are similar to basic NLP exercises, and that we just bring them in as clean a way as we can into our learning processes, and then give people a chance to react and respond, because then they find for themselves, not here is the right way to communicate, here's the recipe and here's how you're supposed to do it. It's more,
Yeah.
I felt that and I felt this, so that then when I'm in a conversation with my team, I'll notice when I'm going this way, and I have practiced, having the body the ability to shift to this way.
Yeah, got it. Good.
Yeah.
So you've used the word clean a few times. Are you familiar with clean language, the way that's been put forth as a?
Yes, I am aware of it. I have not, I think once or twice I listened to some message they were putting out, but I thought, wow, great. Here are some people who are going down that pathway and working it. But they are fairly intensive in the language, in the verbal, clean language and articulating. And we're, having been trained in NLP, we're working in, language as defined as everything that we do.
Not just the words themselves.
Internal and external. Yeah, language is all language, and it is all behavior, and it is all. But then, there's the whole other side of things. NLP can sound kind of not meaningful.
NLP can sound not meaningful?
It can feel, it's procedural. I mean, it's process more than content.
Right.
And so I find that working with more bringing in meaning is important in terms of how people frame their outcomes and connecting to what's important for them, so that we're not being mechanistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, NLP can sometimes seem somewhat, like you said, procedural and cold and heartless. Just it's a machine oriented. How do you get this machine to, produce the outcome that you want it to produce? Yeah, I get it.
I mean, some of us love this. Some of us love the going, language and systems and distinctions.
Yeah, some of us do. But it's amazing because NLP works so well, and it's so unfortunate in a way that it's gotten, I don't know if it's a bad rap, but some schools, some areas it does have a bad rap. But when it's done properly, when people are smart thinkers about how the systems work and are putting together like you've done for years, I mean, look at the resume at the bottom of your website. You've got Oracle, you've got Hewlett Packard, you've got all these companies that you've been influencing with your systems to make their companies better. I mean, this stuff really works. It
does work, but also I want to advocate for a pure type version of what is NLP.
Okay, go for
it. Because NLP is often interpreted as being the content it has modeled or the processes it has modeled. When pure NLP is the ability to model.
Yes.
And since it's modeling what works. I have a funny memory about Wyatt Woodsmall and Richard Bandler, and when they went into a government, a very high level government office, and they were asked, what is NLP? And Wyatt's answer was, well, if it works, it's NLP. Which to me is sort of the confounding of we model what works.
Right.
And so because we are good modelers, as were John Grinder and Richard Bandler, and the people with them like Robert and the other people who are modelers.
Yeah, David.
They were modeling whatever. They were going for excellence, but they were modeling whatever. So it was the modeling process. It wasn't now we have the 6 steps of reframing.
Right.
Because, to me, anything that gets that procedural is, I'm like, I'm more random. I'm more random and holistic than I am linear and sequential.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was Wyatt or John Metch. This has been attributed to a variety of people, but the quote that NLP is an attitude that has left behind a trail of techniques.
Well, at times they said it was it was a bundle of useful lies.
Yeah. but what you're talking about is when you model something, NLP looks at this. It's the subtitle of NLP Volume 1 is the study of the structure of subjective experience. It's looking to see how the system works to create the result that it does, which could be for piano playing, it could be for golfing, it could be for sharpshooting. I think Wyatt and Richard and other people did a sharpshooting model project for the Army back in the day. But the reason it's thought of, and I use it, many people do, as sort of a therapeutic change tool, is because they modeled Milton Erickson, and they modeled Virginia Satir, and they modeled Fritz Perls, and
they also they modeled some psychics. They went to that. They did that.
Oh, they modeled psychics?
There was a whole thing where they went to Florida and they were meeting with this guy who was a widely renowned psychic, and they were doing a little bit of outsmarting the psychic somewhat. I think there was some competitive angle to it. I'm not sure, but they I think, was it Richard and Ed and Marianne Reese?
Okay.
In Florida, I think. I was not party to that. It just was rumored then for some time of what they got out of that, of trying. And for me, in the syntax model, we put a model that came from a different school of thought, from Fernando Flores and his linguistic work, that was appropriate modeling excellence in business, and how do you interact in business. That was not something that NLP modeled. Like clear requests and agreements are not in NLP.
So Fernando Flores, I'm unfamiliar with his name.
Communication for Action was the name of a course that he spread widely. He did work that he called ontological design, a Chilean who had come to the US.
Okay.
And was actually influential in some of the early online messaging systems that were being developed, interestingly enough. And he was trying to take language acts, speech acts, and put them into software so that people would keep track of their requests, responses, and so on, just like you try to do today with your subject line and email. This is a request.
Right.
But so he was a modeler big time, but in different domains. So if there are Bob Dunham of the Institute for Generative Leadership right now, and Karen Aberle are several of the people who bring this work out now. But definitely I was strongly influenced by Fernando and the work that they did. And including them being aware of the embodiment, that embodiment is so important, that we can't get all mental.
Yeah.
But definitely a deeper student of speech acts and communication than we found within NLP. And I think their roots in terms of linguistics may have been similar. There were certain people I studied who had roots in linguistics, and I just don't know that field well enough to know, how they're interrelated. But they're Umberto Maturana was one of the big philosophers, so they overlapped with philosophy. As NLP kind of does.
Yeah, it does for sure. I want to ask you how, because this is the Essential Coaching Skills podcast, and I certainly want people to come away with some insights that are beyond just like, wow, she's amazing. What would be like a takeaway that people could have from your syntax for change? What would be an example of how that could be used, like in a coaching process? If I was working with a client who had an issue, what would be my syntax for making that change?
Actually, I'd take something that is a combination of syntax and a fundamental of transactional analysis, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Because
if I may just stop you right there for a quick second. If people don't know transactional analysis, it's a fascinating field of study of psychology. It was huge back in the 70s, I think, when books like
in the
Born to
US,
Win,
yes.
that's the book that turned me onto it back in, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s. Born to Win was a bestseller. I mean, it was a huge book. And so is I'm Okay, You're Okay. Is that transactional analysis?
It is. That was written by Tom Harris, who was not actually the founder of, well, yes, he was not the founder of transactional analysis. Dr. Eric Berne, Berne,
Burn. Yeah. I've got a
was the
couple of
founder, and it began to be popular with the bestseller Games People Play, and a lot of things that are in the language now came out
I
of
still
TA.
have the book. Yeah, I still have the book. I just want people to know that if you're unfamiliar with this, check it out because it's fascinating and there's a lot of overlap as you're about to tell us. So please.
And I'd like to come back to that actually, because this is where I'm thinking that the synthesis of the TA and NLP and some of the energetic NLP, which we haven't talked about yet, will come together in some of the work that I'm planning to do later this year, where people would have an opportunity to take a class.
Oh, wow,
you know, if they want to be part of a group and take a class, because it's a new synthesis going on right now.
Go for it. Tell us more.
That I've been working on it, but to go back to what is useful, what can people take away that is important, that I was saying was from syntax, and also recognizing that my fundamental training in transactional analysis that embodies the I'm okay, you're okay principle. And that wasn't part of the way therapy or training education was done, is you make a contracting. Like the only work that we do is because you and I have a contract to do that. And there are certain qualities to a good contract that make 99% of the difference between whether the person you're working with is going to get the change that they want out of the work. So contracting is important. And with syntax, that fits in the arena of reaching agreements, like making a clear request or agreement. And so if you're a coach, how clear is your contract with your coachee? Have they used, as from NLP or syntax, have they at least given a good shot at what's their desired outcome?
Okay, so would that be an example of a contract to say, we agree that this is your desired outcome and we will both work towards accomplishing it?
It would be first you elicit a desired outcome, a purpose, and then the agreement gets made. Is here's what you'll do, here's what I'll do. I am making this offer. I will also make requests of you. I'm your coach. I'm going to make these requests of you. You're going to make these I'm making this offer, which is I will listen and I will provide XYZ modeling or other information or mentoring or what within the contract.
Okay.
And here's how we'll know, which is very NLP, is here's how we'll know when we'll get there.
Yeah, so it's sensory specific. So is this an overtly stated contract? Could you write this down? Is that level of specificity?
I mean, a lot of it varies with the depth of the engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So there is kind of, when you're a coach, you've kind of got an administrative contract with people, and some people have that in writing of how they'll be paid and what the meeting frequency will be and what the accountability will be. So I would say that adding a verbal conversation about what the desired outcome is, and the coach retaining it enough so that they can bring the client back to the desired outcome.
Okay, got it. Good.
What our contract is that we're working toward this outcome. I mean, I was recently talking with a coach whose person wasn't showing up and was always having a reason to not show up. And the contract included the person beginning to show up for herself. And so it was appropriate within that contract for the coach to say, take a look at how it is that you're deferring these sessions, because this is within our contract that you,
Got it.
that, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, if that, yeah. I mean, this is not, none of it is really rocket science. It's just that we're pulling out and articulating things that we need, that are part of our embodied practice.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, got it.
Are we
Got it.
making sense here? Are we?
Right. Good. So then with the syntax, what's the next step after that?
After the
contract?
After contracting, well, the contract tells you, what it is you're going to be working on. If we're using syntax as our frame and as our model, then we would do an assessment of these 5 areas of syntax, of people's own, their various ways of doing the self-assessment. We have adopted a variety of tools, such as doing a social atom. It's called that in psychodrama, but it's really just drawing a map of the main relationships in a person's work, or depending on what context they're working in, their work team, and then actually mapping what's going on in the relationships just by the type of, okay, let's assess and look at each aspect of where you need to have influence, because syntax for influence is who is it that we need to have positive outcomes with.
Yeah. Got it.
And then,
Go ahead.
it can go a lot of directions.
Yeah, I can see that. So, and does transactional analysis come into there as well, like you being the child or you being the parent, or?
Well, so that doesn't, within syntax, we don't introduce those concepts.
Okay.
Because we're sort of intentionally skirting personality content. We're teaching it as systems. And then people are bringing their own personality and their own, we're not doing anything that would be really getting into the inner space.
Got it. Yeah.
And the TA, it's just the language is so useful and the different aspects fit together so well that part of what my passion, what I've been doing apparently my whole life, is I like to learn different models. I like to assess how they are as models. Like, what makes a good model? What makes it elegant? What makes it essential? And so how do you boil things down, and are they coherent? So like NLP, there are a lot of categories of stuff you can learn. It doesn't have an internal coherence.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, as far as, whereas TA, you have an understanding of the personality and how it develops. And you were referring to the parent, adult, and child ego states. Like, sometimes I'm telling you, go clean your room.
Right.
And I'm doing it in such a way that you won't question unless you're a teenager or a 2-year-old, in which case you will fight me automatically. So these are things I would know in TA is developmentally what would be going on at what stage. So here I am, in my parent, or I can be, as we've been talking, mostly adult with a little sprinkling of child in it.
Yeah.
And when people can sort out that their transactions with other people are continually resulting in what they don't want, then they recognize the next stage of transactional analysis, which is game analysis. Like, how do I keep interacting in such a way that I end up feeling hurt? Or how is it that people, I keep giving people advice, but then they turn on me and they don't take the advice? Or how is it that, I always end up in between my spouse and my child, and we're having an ongoing circular fight, or something goes on. And so having the tools of TA to decode that with game analysis, and then you see how it fits into a life script. So moment by moment, I'm having my internal dialogue, I'm having my relationship with you, and what I'm doing is I'm enacting my life script. So let's say I use NLP techniques and I really shift and reframe, then I may be making a change in my life script. because moment to moment, then I will be engaging in behavior that's more productive.
Yeah. Nice.
I mean,
So
this
just
all sounds
again,
obvious to me. Does it sound obvious to you?
it's very clear to me. I just want to make sure it's clear to some of my listeners who might not know these terms, because I read Born to Win probably like 1978 or something. I was still in college. Yeah, so I'm familiar with these terms, and I also I got a couple of children's books like TA for Teens, which cleared it. That book, it laid it out very, very clearly, and so I do understand. But as life scripts is fascinating concept. I just think it's brilliant. But I know that there are some people who are listening to this who are hypnotists who are thinking, so you're talking about like a hypnotic script, that you write a script, and it's like, no,
Right.
that's not what
And
we're
it's
talking about.
so interesting that, I'm sorry, I didn't let you finish.
No, that's okay. I was just wanted to make sure that people understood what you're talking about when you say a life script. What could you give
And
us
it's so funny. I mean, since the day of when TA came forth, there's so many modern therapies that are addressing variations of the same things without the simplicity of language, but they're still doing so. Narrative therapy, for example, and understanding life narratives would be something on the bridge to life scripts.
Mm-hmm.
The life script and meta programs might be another way of showing how the life script shows up in NLP terms, meta programs.
Right. Yeah.
But a life script is the story of your life based on early decisions that you've written for yourself.
Right.
And that then you grow up and you try it out and you figure out how to show up as the person that you wrote you would be in your life script. Right. And you sort of audition other people in your life for the roles that would be. So you can really use drama and psychodrama as much as the framework for understanding life script as something where you're writing a script or a narrative. It's just what the child wrote for themselves, and then the life course is what actually happens.
Right. So nothing of this is actually written. Nobody's written this down. This is not an actual script. This is just metaphorical representation of life. I have this. And again, the reason I was asking you about contracts, can you make it so explicit that you can actually write it down, is that we have these agreements, these, in a way, contracts with, I'm going to act this certain role, the script that I have for myself, I'm going to be this way and you be that way. I'll be this way, you be that way. This is our role. We've agreed on it non-verbally, but we've agreed that you'll be this and I'll be this, and this is our little pattern that we'll stick with. And then, that's what I've agreed on. And then that's my life script, and I'll go through life like that. And so I'll always find somebody to fill that role for me so that I can be in this role. But we don't have to stick to those roles. They're games. They're just roles. They're just scripts that we wrote, and we can rewrite them and shift the different scripts, do different things, and have a completely different life if we chose to.
I mean, one of the ways they distinguish types of scripts is you have your winner script, you have your non-winner or at leaster script,
right,
and you have your loser script. So that one's interesting. There's another way that people observe scripts, which are that you can also hear in their language patterns. There's somebody named Tabby Kaler who developed a whole area called mini scripts, which is in a way as close as it comes over to NLP, because it's such a behavioral model of how people act out their script on a moment-to-moment basis. And one of the things that you are listen for are verbal patterns that represent be perfect, try hard, be strong, hurry up, please others. People can usually identify which are their primary one that they're driven by in their acting out of their life script.
Wow. What's that person's name again?
Tabby, Taibi, Kaler, Kahler. He developed a model called Process Communication Model, PCM.
Okay.
Tabby Kaler and Process Communication. And I think it's taken on some other names. And similar to TA, it is as well known abroad as it is in the United States or North America.
I see.
So some of these things have migrated so that the fact that many people in the US haven't heard of transactional analysis, some people who move here from other countries are like, what? No, you don't have people, you don't have TA training in every town?
Right.
And there was, we did at one time.
No, that
And
was
that's
huge.
one of the reasons that I want to teach more TA, because I don't want it to be lost. I want TA to be out there in the current, whether you're a coach, I mean, as an essential coaching set of coaching skills, transactional analysis is just one of the best sources anywhere, because even in the relationship between the coach and the client, you're varying between, parent, adult, and child. And just as with a therapist, they are going to act out their life script, and you have a role in their life script. And if you're not an observer of that, you can play into, like what you were talking about with Robert, is people set a field around them. You can be playing into the field of their life script without being conscious of it.
Sure, of course.
And then it does not end well.
No. Well, actually, it ends perfectly. It ends exactly the way it was scripted to, but it doesn't end well.
Right, exactly perfect. Yes, exactly. I really like your attitude, Doug.
I had a therapist once who was a Jungian analyst who his doctoral thesis was called the renegade factor. And he was talking about basically this same sort of thing, that we have this role we're supposed to play, that we've contracted for verbally, non-verbally, and consciously, unconsciously. But we said this is who we're supposed to be in life, and we go through life, fulfilling this role. But as we reach through therapy and work, get to a place of individuation, as Jungian would call it, then we can be a renegade. We can say, I'm going to renege on that contract. And basically it feels, this is his phrase, it feels like you're committing a crime. You're committing the crime of your own uniqueness.
Oh, wow.
I love that phrase.
Love that.
You can be the crime of your own uniqueness.
I love it. And some of the work with transactional analysis overlaps with Gestalt therapy.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of the reworking that can happen, between a person's internal parent, adult, and child can happen with some projection techniques where you actually are renegotiating the role, with the parent in your head, so to speak, and make new decisions that then are integrated throughout the whole personality, so that it's natural to you and that you're like, oh, not like I'm this person trying to act like. It's that you have done the work with the, yes, Richard and John, when they were first starting out, transactional analysis was very big in the US.
Yes.
And they liked putting it down and saying the only people who have 3 people in their head are transactional analysts. When TA is just simply another way of modeling what people recognize as their own subjective experience, that we do have those.
Yeah. It's also interesting in the history of NLP with Richard and John that, the Gestalt modeling that they did of Fritz Perls. I mean, in the early days, you were there at Dotar. So tell me if I'm wrong, but there is a lot of use of positions and Gestalt sort of thing, and step over to this person and talk to that person over there in this empty chair technique or whatever. And that kind of was the thing about NLP until they met Erickson. And then
So there was the Gestalt part, there was the kind of psychodrama part that came through Virginia Satir, where Satir positions, and understanding that was some of the content they also brought, along with Fritz Perls on the Gestalt.
Right.
They actually, I was there at one point where they were modeling, I'm not thinking of his name right now, but Moshe Feldenkrais.
Yeah.
Yes, he was there, and it was quite interesting to watch Richard Bandler interacting with Moshe Feldenkrais. It was special.
Now, you also went to Phoenix, didn't you? And worked with Erickson
Yes,
for a couple. Tell us about
I
that. You
did.
were, yeah. Tell us about
I
that.
was
So you
very
went.
fortunate because there was a long waiting list because all the NLPers in the world wanted to go see Erickson, and
I
I had
bet.
not initially jumped at the chance because I was actually afraid if this man could really see through you, and I wasn't. I was a little too defended to want that, but I soon got over that, and and had the opportunity open up twice, sort of by fate, that if I could abandon whatever I was doing and get on a plane, I could get to Phoenix. And
Uh-huh.
so two different times, one was more planned and one was a very spur of the moment, and I got to go.
Wow.
And it was quite that was life changing for me. And I even had heard that somebody else had done this, and so I'd seen them do it the first time I was there. So the second time I asked him for some time just with him.
Mm-hmm.
He said, and he said in his almost not understandable way of speaking, was when the others leave, you stay.
Uh-huh.
And so I stayed, and I had about an hour of sitting with Milton. And at
Wow.
one point I said, Dr. Erickson, would you, tomorrow in the group, would you mind putting me into a trance? Because I'm not sure I've ever been in one, which now thinking is like the funniest things I ever said, but I just didn't have the validation of what is it. The
Right.
next day he had me in a position where my arm was raised and I couldn't stand up. And he got me completely convinced that. But then when I was sitting with him, I said, I don't think I've ever been in one. He said, have you heard the traffic sounds for the last hour? And I said, no. He said, some people don't want to know when they're in a trance. It gives them more freedom. So he always had a way. And I told you yesterday that I had his signature, and I
Oh,
will
his
send you
signature.
this picture.
Wow, that's so cool.
And this is him saying, be wary of your conscious mind. It's too damn curious. Trust your unconscious mind. October 1979, Milton H. Erickson, MD.
Beautiful. What color is the ink?
Oh, purple, of course. And when I left there, I was not consciously doing it, but suddenly I found I was purchasing mostly purple things. I suddenly had purple in my wardrobe. I was like, oh, yay, that worked. And well, I returned to it in later life just because I love it. But yeah,
I didn't notice which book that was signed like that. Which book was
it's
it?
hypnotherapy. It's the one he did with Ernie Rossi.
Okay, yeah. Good. Yeah.
It was just happened to be the one that was, there at the time.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's thrilling. That's
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
That's
I've been so fortunate. I mean, I actually got to go to a workshop with Virginia Satir one
wow.
time. It was a large workshop. It wasn't like an intimate connection at the same level, but I have the experiences that were produced in that one workshop for educators have stuck with me. The metaphors created and they were truly groundbreaking. I came on too late to meet Fritz Perls.
Uh-huh.
Or Eric Byrne, the founder of Transactional Analysis. He had already passed before I
Oh,
got
really?
into TA.
Oh,
Yes,
so
he died in 1970, and I got into TA in 72.
did he die young, or did that work come along late for him?
He died of exactly what he was writing about in his book about scripts. He died at 60 of a heart attack.
Wow, because his father had done the same thing,
His
or
mother.
something. His mother. Hmm.
I believe it was his mother. Yeah, that was because in the book, What Do You Say After You Say Hello, which is a major work on life scripts, he talks about this. It was published after his death.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of that he uses as an example, it's the doctor doesn't get to heal himself in that case.
Oh, yeah.
But he was definitely a pioneer. Definitely a pioneer.
Neat. Well, I'm sorry you didn't get to meet him, but boy, the people that you have met and worked with is astonishing to me. Did you ever meet Gregory Bateson?
No, no, I was too late. I was too late. But I get to meet people like you, and this is what.
I
Have
know,
you ever
right?
seen Have you seen the Nick and Monty tapes of Milton?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and one of the things he says as he's sitting in his wheelchair, he says how wonderful it is to be in his wheelchair because people from so many parts of the world come to see him. I just feel very blessed to have been connected with you and with all of the people who are part of the TA and the NLP world, and the one we mentioned yesterday that we hadn't talked about yet today, Art Geiser, who's the developer of
Yeah,
energetic NLP.
tell us a little bit about, and because frankly, I have heard of Art Geiser. I know the name for a long time, but I don't really know what energetic NLP is. And you told me a little bit about it yesterday. So could you just tell us a little bit about it in the little remaining time that we have left?
Sure, sure. And people are welcome to, they should go check out energeticnlp.com if they
Okay.
have some interest in I would put it this way, in the non-visible realms. I mean, here we are in NLP, everything comes down to sensory, experience. We can describe
Yeah.
in sensory-based terms what we experience. Well, in energetic NLP, we go to what we can describe an experience that might not be sensory based. I mean, yes, I can interpret it and use sensory terms to describe things that would not necessarily be visible to another person or feelable. In other words, energy. Energy exists. Energy exists. Our thoughts create energy fields. Our beings exist at a more expanded level than just the individual human that we see. Whether we think in auras, whether we think in different kinds of energy systems and how they interact. Well, art has taken it to the level of how do we, with our normal human perception, open up to more levels of perception, and how do we do healing if that's what we're into doing? How do we do, whether it's changing our life course, something like that? How do we align our words that he uses are like soul, spirit, unconscious and conscious mind, and body? How do we align all of those levels so that we could take congruence to a whole new understanding? And how do we read what's going on, including remotely? You don't have to be there with, you don't even have to be on Zoom or Yardstream, or YouTube. So some of the things that we engage in are remote healing, reading and doing what we'd call energy work. And so it has a foundation in NLP, but it also has a foundation in spiritual traditions that Art has studied. And it's just been great to have him as a teacher, because there are spiritual teachers that kind of come with the cost of adhering to their belief system.
Yeah.
And it's really clear with Art that he doesn't take that position, and that, he introduces it. It's sort of like what Richard and John said when it was a pack of useful lies that they were teaching as NLP, he calls it the beliefs du jour. So that we're open to expanding our beliefs and being aware of more than our initial rational training might have allowed for. So for me, it's both nourishing and a lot of fun, because you can't do it unless you're lighthearted. You can't do it. Sure.
Out of curiosity, speaking of NLP and spirituality sort of things, are you familiar with Connie Ray Andreas's latest work, The Wholeness Process?
I have not grabbed it yet, and I have been an admirer of Connie Ray throughout all these many years. Yes.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, the core transformation is great. I use that all the time with people, but she's really gone, full into the wholeness process, or I think that's what it's called. And Yeah, I don't know enough about it to really describe it, and I guess I missed the launch of it for this year, so I got to wait because they do it in segments, so to get it to next year. But I'm looking forward to finding out more about it. But I was just wondering how well it integrated with what you're talking about with energetic and this kind of spiritual approach to NLP or an NLP
I look
approach.
forward to checking that out because it makes sense. I mean, I sometimes question, well, is it that I'm learning more and evolving, or simply moving through the life stages that people move through, where I'm more more about wholeness than about let's solve this thing.
Well, gosh, I'm gonna let you go. This has been so fun and enlightening, and such a delight to get to know you, Lucy. It's just amazing to me. So one more time, for people to find you, they go to syntaxforchange.com. Is that correct?
That's a good place.
And if they wanted to email you, would it be Lucy at
syntaxforchange.com?
Okay.
And great. It would be great to hear from people if they have an interest in TA or in any of this energy stuff, because new things are emerging. This is a time of change, and whoever wants to play in this emergent universe. And I just so appreciate you, Doug, because I see and hear how you are capturing and sharing the learnings from a lot of different people. So I admire you a lot.
Oh, thank you very much. But it's such a delight to be able to do this. Technology is amazing. Can you imagine what I owe so much to COVID?
I hate to say it, but it's true. It is really, really true. I would also, before we go, mention again that those who are looking at applied NLP in corporate, in learning or coaching sessions, that Smart Work is a good resource for you. It's very good to as something to give to clients.
Smart Work, your book that is available through
Smart Work, the Syntax Guide to Influence, that you can find at my website, that you can find in Amazon, in the interwebs.
Beautiful.
But I think people would find that helpful. Yeah.
I'm sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.